Well, hey guys, I'm Nick and welcome back to Sci-Finatics. Or if you're a new visitor here or a regular visitor who hasn't subscribed yet, please go ahead and click that big red subscribe button to stay up to date with all of the latest Star Trek news on YouTube. So today we're talking about the first episode of Star Trek Prodigy. It's just aired. I've just literally come from watching the episode, sitting down to give my review, and man, I was not disappointed at all by this first episode of Prodigy. I was worried that the show was going to be a little bit kiddie-ish, a bit too targeted at younger audiences, but that was not the case at all. I think this pilot episode had stuff in it for young viewers, it had stuff in it for older viewers. It was exciting, the animation was beautiful, the characters, as we're getting to learn and know them, are great. I was really impressed by this first episode of the show, and I can't wait for episode 2. So let's get into my review and breakdown of our first episode of Star Trek Prodigy, Lost and Found. So the show starts out on Tar's Lamora, which is a prison colony somewhere in the Delta Quadrant. And we see a whole bunch of sort of slaves essentially working on mining from inside a bunch of sort of caves and caverns and so forth. Looks like they're mining crystals. A cute little opening in the shot. We see as the crystals are being loaded onto a conveyor and so forth, one of the shapes of one of the crystals takes the form of the Starfleet Delta. So that was kind of a cute opening to the show, I thought. This prison colony, or mining the asteroid, kind of reminds me a little bit of the Urapenthe Klingon mines that we saw in Star Trek 6, where you've got a whole bunch of, slaves of different alien species. They're all mining the inside of an asteroid for dilithium crystals. It's very much along those sort of Urapenthe lines. And one by one, we get introduced to our main characters, starting with Dal, who obviously is our kind of hero of the show, and is the character that our first episode is all wrapped around, followed by the Medusan Zero, who is being sought after by the prison colony's warden, I suppose you'd call him, the Diviner, and his henchman Dreadnought is trying to hunt down Zero, this Medusan. One thing that occurred to me watching this first episode was, I think, the fact that maybe because I'm a big Star Wars, the Clone Wars fan, but this first episode did certainly in a lot of instances have a lot of more Star Wars isms in it than Star Trek isms. The whole concept of the Diviner was sort of like the Emperor. Dreadnought was kind of more like a Darth Vader or a General Grievous type character. And the gritty, more sort of grungy, lived-in, environment of the asteroid kind of, in some ways, spoke a little bit more Star Wars-esque than it did Star Trek-esque. It wasn't until we got on board the Protostar where we started to really get that sort of Star Trek flavour going on. But look, I didn't think that was a bad thing at all. I think it's good when, there are aspects of Star Wars that creep into Star Trek, and also when aspects of Star Trek creep into Star Wars, for that matter. Being a fan of both genres, I can appreciate both. We had Gwyn using a sword that would spontaneously generate from programmable matter sword that was wrapped around her arm like a bracelet that would just suddenly appear much like a lightsaber out of thin air kind of thing. So there was a few of these sort of Star Wars-esque elements in this first episode, but I enjoyed them. Now, we also got in our first episode a full name for Dal. Previously, we'd only known him as Dal. Now we know his last name is Dal-Rael, R''EL. But we still don't know what race he is. That seemed to be an ongoing mystery in this first show, where they kept asking him what species he was. There was a couple of different characters. The Diviner and Dreadnought were asking him what his race was. Nobody seemed to know what race he was. Even Dal doesn't seem to know what race he belongs to. And as Dal tries to escape after Zero has sabotaged the whole foot ankle restraint system, we get Dal running and bumping into Rok-Tark, who roars like a giant Wookiee, to use another Star Wars-ism. He obviously comes across as a big giant rock creature. Dal thinks he's a big fella, obviously very aggressive, very imposing, made of rock, roaring, grunting sounds and all that sort of stuff, because nobody can understand each other in this opening to this show. There's no universal translator. The asteroid owner, or the warden of the prison colony, the Diviner, doesn't use universal translators between any of the slaves, because obviously if people could communicate, they would be able to form some form of resistance and escape, so he keeps everybody ignorant to each other's languages. And we also get Dal bumping into Jank and Pog as well. And we get a really fun sequence here with Dal stealing the loader, trying to use a mine shaft with all the rock crushers to escape. He hasn't kind of thought things through properly. He's just sort of winging it as he goes along, and he ends up getting himself recaptured again. Now, also towards the beginning, we see a Kazon deliver a new slave or a new worker to the mining asteroid in the form of a Cation. So it seems like even though we've got the asteroid, which I believe is in the Delta Quadrant, we've got Kazon and Kazon ships ferrying slaves to this mining asteroid prison colony, and we've got a real mix of races from, Tellarites to Medusans, to Cations, and a few new ones we haven't seen before. So there's really a very broad mix of races that we've seen not only from the Alpha Quadrant, but also from the Delta Quadrant as well. So it kind of leads me to think, why the mix-up? Why are we getting all these races from different parts of the galaxy coming together in this one place? This whole exchange on the landing platform between Dreadnought and Gwyn and the Kazon, this really felt Star Warsy to me. But that's a good thing. I thought it was cool. It's got the ominous kind of, as I said, Darth Vader or General Grievous kind of style character. They're bartering for this slave who's being handed over for a payment, and from a sort of almost like a bounty hunter kind of character in the form of this Kazon. But I think they worked really well. It made for an exciting first episode, and I didn't think it in any way, reduced the brand of the Star Trek in any way for this first episode. And we also see early on here that Gwyn has a heart. She kind of chastises the Kazon for delivering a slave so young. Obviously this Cation is quite young, and obviously they have a policy about the age of certain slaves, I guess. Although that being said, I guess Rok'Tark seems quite young, but we only find out that later on when you get to hear her voice, and she doesn't appear to be a young girl. She appears to be a giant rock creature that can very easily do manual labour. So it's good to see that Gwyn, has got a little bit of a heart and she's not quite so ruthless. So it seems that the Diviner, the whole reason for mining the asteroid is to uncover the location of this hidden Federation starship, which he kind of is aware is buried somewhere in this asteroid, and he's got all these slaves working to find it, and he's quite worried about the Federation and the influence that could exert on Gwyn if she kind of gets finds it first or gets into it. So he's kind of keeping her quite distant from his plans, and she's quite frustrated as not being kept in the loop. So Rok'Tark and Dal get paired together to do some mining down on some lower levels as punishment. They end up lasering open a cave which exposes the USS Protostar. This show just has those glorious moments of wonderment, which have probably been sorely lacking in Star Trek of recent years, where you get those feelings of the grandeur of the galaxy, the wonderment, where you're looking out to space and seeing, all these different phenomena in the ship, and it's that glorious sense of the starship on the reveal of the Protostar, much like what we would get in some of those Star Trek feature films, like Star Trek, 3 or 4, when you got the reveal of the new Enterprise or whatever, and you get these beautiful glory shots in space dock of the Enterprise, and it kind of hits you in the heart in a lot of ways, I think. And I think, attaching the audience in these moments of wonder, I think, it feels like it's bringing back to Star Trek what has been missing in previous years. Just that sense of the grandeur of the galaxy and a bit of heart and soul. I love the moment when Dal and Rok'Tark get on board the Protostar for the first time, and they're exploring, and Rok'Tark pushes the button to activate the ship and to boot it up and everything, and suddenly the universal translator comes to life and previously Rok'Tark was just growling and grunting and, making these big, deep, gravelly sounds or whatever. And then she suddenly goes, I didn't push anything. It's like with this little squeaky voice from a little girl. And it was, I think it was one of those great moments where even though we kind of knew and we'd seen clips from the show before, I think having that point of reference and walking in Dal's shoes where he had only been introduced to Rok'Tark as this big, giant, gravelly monster kind of creature, and then suddenly he starts to speak with this little squeaky girl's voice. By having that context, I think made the joke so much better. And it was one of those big laugh out loud moments in this episode, I found. Next, we get our introduction to the character of Zero and a bit more backstory. I get Zero as a Medusan is telepathic, and they're able to read most species, but for some reason they can't read the Diviner. There's a little bit of a mystery here as to, even though he's telepathic and can read most races, the Diviner is a mystery to Zero. And it seems like before Zero made himself a robot suit, the Diviner would use him as a means of torture, where we see him in his previous box before he had the robot suit, similar to how we'd seen Medusans before in the original series of Star Trek. And we see him being used on Illurian, one of Morn's race here, as a form of torture. And Zero also fills us in a bit more about the Protostar, saying that a ship of this scale or whatever would normally be crewed by a crew of about 20, but they're going to have to make do with a much smaller complement just to get it operational. But at the bare minimum, to get the ship up and running, they're going to need an engineer. So enter Jankum Pog, the Tellarite. I love this character of Jankum. He's so argumentative, like obviously most Tellarites are. Just thrives on insults and jibes and being that sort of grumpy persona that most Tellarites are, and greatly voiced in this case by Jason Mantzoukas, which you guys would remember, who played Pimento on Brooklyn Nine-Nine and many other funny roles. Now we find out that this crystal that the asteroid's mostly made up of is called chimerium. So it's not dilithium, but I assume chimerium is another very valuable crystal, probably with properties that can be used for, starship flight or some other purpose, I'm guessing. You get a sense between the dialogue between Dal and Gwyn in this first episode that they're on opposite sides, but they have a sort of a unspoken, I guess, sort of camaraderie or connection there that under different circumstances they would be good friends, but I think because Gwyn is the daughter of the Diviner and Dal is a slave prisoner on this asteroid, that they're sort of forced to be separated, but you can kind of tell that there's something there between the two. Now, during a moment on board the Protostar when Dal and Jankum are kind of fighting over the controls and they're both all trying to get the ship up and running, we get a bit of a glimpse at some of the controls on the control panel, and one of the buttons we see on the console there is transwarp. So we now know that the Protostar has a transwarp drive. We also know, looking at some of other displays on board the Protostar, that the ship has obviously photon torpedoes, it has phasers, it has pulse cannons, it's got shields and polarized hull plating, it's got all of the bells and whistles. And during the whole escape process with our crew of the Protostar trying to get out of the tunnels of the mine shaft and fighting off Dreadnought or whatever, we learned Dreadnought's not only like a big General Grievous kind of style droid, but he's also like a transformer as well, because he kind of can transform his limbs. He's got the Dr. Octopus arms, and he's got a big phaser cannon that he can turn into, like was it Megatron from the Transformers? He's got all sorts of things at his disposal. And of course, it was fantastic to see Janeway pop up at the end there to help the crew get their ship sorted out and so forth after a few kind of rough starts and trying to get the shields back online and all that sort of thing. So yeah, great to see Janeway back. There's some really nice moments in this pilot episode that sort of, I kind of felt very nostalgic, and even though it's the first episode, I certainly felt for the crew. I got an emotional attachment to the cast. Look, I think this is a really strong first episode to a new Star Trek series. All in all, loved the first episode, thought it was fantastic. Can't wait for more. Guys, let me know what your thoughts were about our first episode, Lost and Found, of Star Trek Prodigy, Episode 1. Leave your thoughts in the comment section, as always, and please leave a super thanks if you're able to. It really helps the channel out. And also merchandise. My merch store is always open with a big discount always going on. At the moment, it's free shipping until the end of the month. But be sure to check out what's on offer there. And I will see you guys very soon for my next video. Catch you soon.